for you. The U.S. government, between the NIH, USAID, and interestingly the U.S. military, are major funders of vaccine research around the world. Why should the average American care? Because they're footing the bill. Why should the average American see this as value for money, if you will, that really makes a difference for American interests?
Well, I think there are a couple of reasons there. One of them is, the reason the military has been involved in this is, of course, we're in a lot of places around the world, and the technologies that have been developed by the military on tropical diseases have a use more broadly. And so I've been to research stations in Kenya, the country of Kenya, that are American military institutions that have been doing this for 50 years or 100 years in some cases, looking at these kind of diseases. So, America's had a traditional interest in these ideas. We, of course, have an interest in being, a leader in these technologies as far as competitiveness, as far as the American economy. I know you guys probably provide all the figures, but there are many kind of states in the country that have a particular interest in this industry, where this is not just a major employer, but is important to their academic infrastructure, to a lot of other, what they do. So there's a narrow economic interest, and we shouldn't discount that. I think it's quite important. But I think the broader interest here, if you talk with our military leaders, you talk with someone like Bob Gates, or you talk with David Petraeus, we've undergone a revolution in the way that we view American power in the last 10 years. From being primarily military in a lot of circumstances to a much greater emphasis on soft power and how we exert influence in distant parts of the world. It's David Petraeus that talks about how the decisive terrain is the human terrain. And it's very much the kind of military emphasis in the way they do training and a lot of other things. And of course, that was the hard lesson of Afghanistan and Iraq and the way that counterinsurgency works. But it's much broader than that. It's also the way that we exert power in the world, and how these elements of soft power help achieve American interests. So I recently saw a very interesting poll among post 9/11 military officers that came into the military post 9/11. And they talk about how these civilian instruments, development and diplomacy, in their view, are equally important to the military instruments in the achievement of the national interest. And that's the way American military officers are trained now, and given this experience. So they're some of the greatest advocates. You get someone like Bob Gates, who is one of the few cabinet officers that I know of that called for increasing the State Department programs in these areas. Increase somebody else's budget. And I think that's because of people who are on the ground that I have a great deal of respect for, understand that power is not just military power. That we exert our influence on world events in much different ways.